Dear kids, today I'm going to remind you how to make our whole wheat bread that we make. So I've taught most of you already, but just by way of reminder, or if you need a refresher course and I'm not around to help you, you could refer back to this video. So for our whole wheat bread, we're going to start with 3 cups of nice hot water. Now, when I first started learning, I used to temp it. I would take a thermometer and temp it. Now I'm pretty good at being able to just feel it. It's nice and hot. It's not lukewarm, it's not scalding hot, but it's just like a nice hot water that you should be able to get from your tap. So 3 cups of nice hot water and a scant 3 tablespoons of active dry yeast. I get this from Azure Standard online, and I usually get about 5 pounds at a time and just keep it in the freezer because it will keep. I've never had my yeast go bad, so I've kept it in the freezer for sometimes a couple of years and pull it out and it's always fine. And then of course our honey. So it is 3/4 of a cup of honey. So you always want some kind of sugar for your yeast to eat up to start to activate the yeast. And you're going to stir that up until all the yeast is dissolved really well and the honey is incorporated well. And then we're just going to let that set. It's going to proof. So as the yeast activates with the honey, it's going to get all bubbly and it's going to start to rise. So we'll give that about 10 minutes or so, and then we'll come back and start the rest of the process. All right, so our yeast mixture has proofed. You can see we have a nice thick layer of proof, so we know that our yeast is good and working. If it had stayed flat, if it didn't bubble up at all, our yeast would be dead and we would need to start again. So we're going to go ahead and put this in our bowl. And then we're going to put in our oil. I typically use avocado oil. You can use olive oil or grapeseed oil, any kind of liquid oil. I try not to use pure vegetable oil because I think it's not a good oil, but you can make your own decision on that. So it is a 1/2 cup of oil here. If you put in too much oil, your bread will end up with holes in the middle, even though it may be fully cooked through. So I used to try and put a lot of flaxseed in my bread, and every time I did that, I ended up with holes in the middle of my bread. And it took me a while to figure out that it was because it was just too oily, because flax is very oily, so it wasn't worth it. All right, so we do oil, and then we're going to start to put in our flour. This is a hard red wheat that I ground up and in our Nutri-Mill. And you can see here, this is nice. It's got all the different parts. So wheat has 3 different parts. It's got the endosperm, which is the white part. That's got the protein. That's what your white bread is made out of. And it's got the wheat germ, which has all the nutrients and minerals and vitamins in it. And it's got the bran too, which has the fiber. So you want all of the different parts here. We're gonna start with just a couple cups of flour. I might have to grind some more. After I get a couple of cups of flour in here, then I put in my salt. And the reason I don't put the salt in before I put the wheat in is because sometimes the salt will interact with the yeast and it'll kill the yeast if it touches it or whatnot. So I always wait and kind of give it a buffer of a couple cups of flour But you don't want to put too much flour in first, otherwise the salt won't incorporate well into the bread. So it's 1 tablespoon of a good mineral salt. So this is a Redmond's. And we're just gonna keep adding flour. You're gonna keep adding flour. It's gonna be about 9 cups, but really you're gonna go by consistency. So you'll be able to see that as we go. I'm just gonna keep on whisking and adding and whisking until I can't whisk it anymore. It's a great arm workout too. So when you are a purposeful parent, whether it's you girls or moms or wives or you boys just want some bread, you find that working hard at home, you don't need to exercise too much outside of that, because being a good homemaker is hard work and it's physical. And it's not mundane if you know why you're doing what you're doing. I make homemade bread partly because it's amazing and it tastes wonderful, and it would be worth it if it was just that. Sometimes we make things just because they taste good, like our French bread. There's not a whole lot of nutrition in that. There's protein, but not a whole lot, but it's just good. But the whole wheat bread, we do on purpose. It's good for our guts, it's good for our bodies. The fiber in the wheat is an insoluble fiber as opposed to soluble. So from what I understand, what I've read and studied, the insoluble fiber creates bulk in your stool. So you kids know me, I get personal. So if it's TMI, sorry, but it's nothing you're not used to. So it provides bulk for the stool, and it helps transition the stool. It helps move it along. So your soluble fiber that you're going to find in beans and pulses, legumes, psyllium husk, that is going to create more of a gel-like structure that actually slows down the stool, but is what you really want for detoxification, because that's what traps the bile with all of the toxins, so that they don't get reabsorbed in the ileum. That's another video. But unless you get even plenty of soluble fiber, whatever your kidneys and your liver are filtering out, it's just going to get reabsorbed in your body. So let's use both. God gave us insoluble fiber, He gave us soluble fiber. Our bodies need both. And so I do this on purpose. And it's amazing. So I just switched to my wooden spoon. It's starting to get a little bit too thick here. So pretty soon we'll turn it out onto the counter and knead it. All right, I think this is ready to turn out now. I could probably stir in a little bit more, but we're gonna put this on the counter and start hand kneading this. I'm gonna have to grind more flour. Put plenty of flour on your workstation. It's still quite sticky, so we can use a lot more. As we get going, we'll add smaller amounts at a time as needed. And this is the only time I take off my wedding ring, or else it's going to get dough stuck. All right. So the kneading technique is stretch it, fold it, push it, and rotate. Stretch, fold, push, rotate, kind of in that order. You can get a feel for it. I use more the palms of my hands rather than the upper portion with my fingers, or else it gets really too sticky, and I don't know, people don't like getting sticky too much in their fingers. So I use the bottom portion. It's easier to get off of your hands. It's just a more pleasant knead, I guess. So we'll knead it for, I don't know, about 10 minutes or so. You can do it in a food mixer, like KitchenAid, but if I'm doing a quantity like this, I just like to hand knead it. And again, it works those muscles. We're about done. This is about the right consistency. A lot of people talk about the window pane test where they, pinch it and see if they can make it thin enough so they can kind of see through it without it breaking. You can kind of do that with this, but sometimes because it's a whole wheat, because it has bran and germ in it, sometimes those pieces of bran will cause the dough to break even though it is ready. So if you can't get that perfect window pane test right, that's probably the reason I wouldn't worry about it too much. Another thing I forgot to mention is if you're not grinding your own grain, if you are getting your whole wheat flour from the store, do half and half of the whole wheat flour and then half white flour. I don't know what it is. I don't know if they take a lot of the endosperm out of that whole wheat flour, but if you try to make a loaf of bread 100% from whole wheat flour from the store, say a King Arthur or a Gold Medal brand, and it's 100% whole wheat flour, it will turn out as hard as a rock. So save yourself the anguish and just mix that half and half. It'll turn out, you should get a nice loaf that way. If you are getting flour from, say, Azure Standard or like a bulk health food store, and they tell you what kind of flour it's from or what kind of grain, if they say this is hard red winter wheat ground or something like that, or hard white wheat, then you might be able to chance it and do they're less likely to mess with those grains, but definitely if you get it from the store, do half and half. So I think this is good. It's just for our family, and it's always good here. So you rub your hands together really hard, you can get a lot of the pieces off. So I oiled a bowl, just a little avocado oil, and so we're going to put it in the bowl to let it rise. It's going to rise twice, once in the bowl, and then when we take it out, we'll cut it and shape it and let it rise in the pans. So I put it in, and then I flip it over so it's coated so it doesn't dry out, and then I will get a towel and rinse it out with hot water and drape it over here so it stays nice and moist. You can also use plastic wrap, and we'll let it rise. Okay, we are back. Look at how well this has risen. You can see it was bubbling up above the top of the bowl, and you can see the bubble from the towel. So this has risen nicely. We're gonna punch it down now. And it's really not too sticky at this point after it's given its first rise. So this is gonna make 2 big loaves. So I have one of these foot-long bread pans. So if you use the typical bread pan that's 8 inches, it would be 3 of those. But I like these. We got them from a local restaurant supply store. So I'm sure you can get them online. Or you could just use the 8-inch size that you can just get at Walmart. So that's fine. So this is gonna make 2 of them. And I'm just gonna eyeball it here. Sometimes we make, or you might want to make a larger batch. So if you choose to make a huge batch and put some in the freezer, or you're giving some away, then I would for sure measure out the size with a scale, and to make sure that your loaf sizes are the same, they're the same weight. But if it's just 2 of them, the eyeballing it is fine. So you're just gonna punch it out. You don't need to really knead it too much more, to a sort of like a rectangle-ish shape. And you're gonna roll it up into a nice roll and tuck in the ends. And I have greased these pans. That's a great job for little ones to do. So if you've got a bunch of little kids, get their fingers, they like to be involved, so have them butter the pans. I did just spray these because I happen to have some non-stick spray. I usually don't use that, usually I just use butter, but you can use either one. Seam side down, give it a little roll. And now we're gonna let it rise again. So I'm gonna freshen this up with hot water, lay it over, and it will probably take about 30 minutes, takes about half the amount of time to rise the second time as it did the first. So it doubled in size. Over here, it's gonna double in size. It's gonna have a nice bulbous top here, and then we'll throw it in the oven at 400 degrees for 10 minutes, and then we're gonna put it down to 350 degrees for 25 minutes. So this is done. You can see it's nice and bubbly above the top of the pan, but not too much. If you let it rise too much, then when you put it in, it'll fall. So I think this is good. So we're gonna go ahead and put it into my preheated oven. You will notice I said to bake it at 400. I have a convection oven. So when you have a convection oven, you always put it down 50 degrees. So it's 350 on my convection oven. If you have a conventional oven, like most home kitchens, then it would be 400. So these are gonna go in my not so clean oven very gently. And we're gonna do this for 10 minutes. And then I'll put it down to 300 convection in 10 minutes, and then we'll bake it for another 25 minutes. Or if you have a conventional oven, then you would take it from 400 to 350. All right, so our bread is done. We'll take it over to our cooling racks. So yeast bread, you want to turn out of your pans immediately. It's not like your quick breads or your muffins where you want to let it cool for 10 minutes or so before you turn it out. If you don't turn it out immediately, it will get soggy, just from experience. So we're going to let these cool for a little bit, and then we'll slice into them. love